Long before Syria existed as a name, this land was being shaped by forces far older than humanity itself. Hundreds of millions of years ago, much of what is now the Middle East lay beneath shallow seas. Sediments settled, hardened, and were later folded and lifted as tectonic plates moved. Fault lines formed, landscapes cracked and shifted, and over time, mountains rose, plains opened, and river systems carved routes through the land. These natural processes created a corridor between continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe, and that corridor would later define Syria's role in human history. Because of this geography, people did not simply arrive in Syria. They passed through it, settled, traded, and returned again and again. Some stayed, forming early farming communities and towns. Over thousands of years, villages grew into cities, and Syria became part of the wider cradle of civilization linking Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean. Different peoples lived here at different times, often overlapping rather than replacing one another. Early populations spoke Semitic languages, including forms of Aramaic, which would later become one of the most widespread languages of the region. The name Syria itself likely developed through Greek usage and is historically connected to the older term Assyria, although the two were not always the same political entity. As centuries passed, Syria became part of successive empires. It was ruled by powers stretching from Mesopotamia, then absorbed into the Hellenistic world after Alexander the Great, and later governed by the Roman and Byzantine empires. During this period, Syria became one of the most important regions of early Christianity. Cities like Damascus were not only political centers, but religious ones, with Christian communities deeply rooted long before the rise of Islam. In the 7th century, Arab Muslim forces expanded from the Arabian Peninsula, and Syria became part of the Islamic world. Arabic gradually became the dominant language, and Islam the majority faith. However, Syria never became religiously uniform. Sunni Muslims formed the majority, but significant minority communities remained and still remain, including Christians, Alawites, Druze, and others. These communities often lived side by side for centuries, sometimes peacefully, sometimes under strain, depending on who held power. From the early 1500s, Syria was absorbed into the Ottoman Empire. For hundreds of years, it was not a single country, but a collection of provinces governed from Istanbul. Local identities, religious affiliations, and trade networks mattered more than national borders. In the 1800s, Ottoman reforms brought new administration, censuses, and legal systems, laying some of the groundwork for modern statehood. British involvement in Syria did not take the form of direct rule in the way it did elsewhere, uh, but Britain played a major role in the collapse of the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. After the war, European powers reshaped the region. Syria came under a French mandate, approved internationally but deeply resented locally. Over time, resistance grew, and after the Second World War, Syria became an independent state in 1946. The decades that followed were turbulent. Syria experienced coups, political instability, and power struggles. Eventually, a highly centralized state emerged, dominated by security services and ruled by the Assad family. The system maintained contained control and regional influence but left little room for political dissent. In 2011, protests spread across Syria, inspired by wider regional unrest. These protests escalated into armed conflict and then into a prolonged civil war involving domestic factions and foreign powers. The human cost was immense. Hundreds of thousands were killed, millions were displaced, and entire cities were damaged or destroyed. Syria became one of the largest refugee crises of the modern era. During the 2020s, Syria entered a new and uncertain phase. Bashar al-Assad was removed from power in late 2024, and the country began a fragile transition. However, the end of a leader did not mean the end of conflict. Armed groups remained, foreign influence continued, and unresolved questions about territory, governance, and minority rights persisted. Clashes continued in parts of the country, showing how fragile the situation remained even after the fall of the old regime. Religious and ethnic divisions, some centuries old, were sharpened by years of war. Minority communities carried deep fears shaped by persecution from extremist groups and revenge attacks during the conflict. Trust, once broken on such a scale, is slow to rebuild. Beyond what Syria could look like in 20 to 40 years. Scenario 1: gradual stabilization and rebuilding. If armed factions are successfully integrated into a single national framework, and if foreign powers reduce their involvement, Syria could slowly rebuild. Refugees might return over decades rather than years. Cities could recover unevenly, and politics would remain tense, but daily life might stabilize. Scenario 2, a fractured state with recurring conflict. If political settlements fail, Syria could remain divided in practice, even if unified on maps. Localized fighting, ceasefires, and power struggles could continue for decades, creating a cycle of instability without full collapse or full peace. Scenario 3, a new authoritarian order. History shows that some wars end not with pluralism, but with a different form of strong central control. Stability might return on the surface, but at the cost of political freedom, storing up tensions for the future. Scenario 4, regional shock and renewed collapse. Syria's location means it is vulnerable to wider regional crises. A major conflict involving neighboring states or renewed extremist movements could undo years of recovery in a short time. Syria's story is not a straight line. It is a layered history of land, people, faiths, and power, shaped by geography as much as politics. What comes next is still being written. This section on the future represents informed analysis and opinion based on historical patterns and current conditions. History explains how Syria arrived here, but it does not guarantee where it will go. Sources and references, not spoken. United Nations reports, academic geological studies of the Levant, historical scholarship on the Ottoman and Mandate periods, international conflict monitoring organizations, and major international news agencies reporting on Syria through 2024 to 2026. If you want, next I can, trim this to exactly 10 minutes spoken time, adapt the tone, calmer, darker, more documentary, or write the YouTube description, tags, and 5 strong titles to match your other uploads.
Thank you for listening, and if you like my channel, please like, share and subscribe.